Welcome to LifeSite News in Focus for this November 20th, 2022. You know, in today's day and age, women are a focus of so much. Well, they're going to be a focus on this show too, because in very many ways, particularly in the pro-life movement, but for the whole movement of life, faith, family, and freedom, women do fight. They sacrifice greatly, they pray greatly, and they fight for justice. We're going to take a look at that on this episode of InFocus. Stay tuned. If you look at the front lines of the pro-life movement, you will always see women leading the way because, after all, they are more connected to the children in the womb than anyone else. And so many of the women who champion the right to life have themselves been on the other side, have suffered this horrendous thing we know today as abortion, but it's the killing of innocent children in the womb. And so they themselves are out there on the front lines. But in the whole movement, in the whole fight for life, for faith, for family, and freedom, there is a ton of women. If you remember when Mark Houck was raided by the FBI, who was it that spoke up? It was his wife, Ryan Marie, who demanded to see the right for the police officers to go there. Did they have a warrant? Well, she demanded it. They said they get her one or whatever. But she was the one standing up. She was the one giving interviews right off the bat for her husband. Truly heroic. Well, in this battle, there are other women. And sometimes women stand up in ways that a lot of men don't. During the whole pandemic, there was a woman who we know because we featured her at LifeSiteNews. Jane Bernardel is her name. She refused to mask because she felt that in front of our Lord Jesus, present truly in the Blessed Sacrament, body, blood, soul, and divinity, it was an insult to him to put a mask on, so she didn't. We learned later the great suffering she endured. Not only did she get arrested for doing that in the church, police were called, she was arrested in front of her children. She also was banned by the local bishop from coming into any of the churches there. Take a look at this clip from Jim Hale's interview with Jane Bernardel.
Hello friends, I'm Jim Hale, coming to you today with an update to an important and disturbing story that we originally reported on 2 years ago. It was during the peak of COVID hysteria when Catholic homeschool mom Jane Bernardel was arrested in front of her children for not wearing a mask on the Feast of All Saints in the Diocese of Kansas City, Missouri. And I am sad to report today that the ordeal that Jane and her family endured has only worsened since our reporting. I traveled to Kansas a year and a half ago to meet with Jane and her family on their farm in Kansas outside the diocese. She's been trying to resolve her status ever since, and Jane joins us now to talk about what is really a shocking development in this unbelievable story. And Jane, I know that you've been attempting to address this quietly to no avail. So first of all, I want to thank you for having the courage to come forward to talk about this. And this has just been a terrible ordeal for you and your entire family. So Jane, please tell us about this, this letter that you received from the Bishop of Kansas City.
I received a penal precept is what the canon lawyer and the church states it is in March, dated February, telling me that I cannot go to any churches or functions in the diocese, with the exception of cemeteries.
Okay, Jane, we're gonna put this letter up, and we're gonna talk about some of the specifics of this letter, this canonical rebuke and penal precept. But first of all, for those that don't remember, if you can just go back and tell us exactly what happened on the Feast of All Saints 2 years ago.
On the Feast of All Saints in 2020, my family and I were praying in the church at Redemptorist in Kansas City, Missouri, St. Joseph Diocese. And I was asked to mask and did not mask, and not only did not mask, but told them I wasn't leaving. So that pretty much got them very upset and called the police right away and had me handcuffed and taken out of the church. So,
yep. And it's important to point out here too that the priest who demanded that you put a mask on and who called the police was not wearing a mask.
No, he was not. In fact, he was depositioned by my attorney, and I think that, of course, only made them more mad. But in the deposition, he did state that he didn't remember whether he was masked or not. But me and my family were there, and he wasn't masked.
Yes, Jane, and so as I mentioned earlier, you know, I traveled out to Kansas to meet with you and your family because you live in the state of Kansas, but your family has been worshiping at a parish in Kansas City, correct? Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes, it sounds long, but it's a 20-minute drive.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, Jane, I just got to say that the time that I spent with your family was so wonderful. And it was just one of those moments, you know, we were out there, we had breakfast together. I got to see the farm. You know, it was just obvious to me that you guys are really attempting to live an abundant Catholic life on your farm. You attend the Latin Mass. You know, it's plainly obvious to see that your children love the Catholic faith. So could you just tell us a little bit about the impact that this has had on your family?
Well, first of all, my children still talk about you too, and what they, how you walked around the farm with them, and I don't think I was even outside when you did that with them. So they had a great time with you. The impact on my family. Well, we thought things were, rolling right along, and my case was actually dismissed in January of this year. So it did take a while, but it was dismissed. They like to remind me that I was supposed to. They waited 6 months, so the judge said that I would dismiss it in 6 months if you didn't bother Redemptorist Church anymore. And so it was dismissed in January of this year.
Right.
Since that time, we assumed things were going to go smoothly for my family. Of course, life on earth right now isn't very smooth, and the church is in, it appears in, a sad state, but we didn't see what happened as somebody from actually a Kansas priest in the hierarchy called me and told me that was giving me the heads up that I was going to be served a censure. So I had to look up what that was. I didn't know what that meant even. And on the phone, he tried to describe it to me. So, and I said, but why would they do that? What have I done? And he said, Jane, it probably nothing. But people are being persecuted, and I think you're one of those people. They had asked him to serve the precept because, see, I'm out of their jurisdiction. So they had called him to ask him to participate in a meeting with me and the Kansas City, Missouri side, so they could give me the precept.
And Jane, let's talk about this precept, because when you read this is just unbelievably harsh. This comes from the Bishop of Kansas City, Most Reverend James V. Johnson Jr., so Bishop Johnston. And in this, there are all kinds of accusations that he makes against you. Could you just talk about some of these? Especially, he says that you actually struck one of the parishioners there, and that you've caused grave disturbances. What is your response to the accusations that the bishop is making in this letter?
Well, first of all, the accusations come from one person at the church, at the parish, and we've traveled together. We have been friends. Our families have known each other for 20 years. So, what happened that day was really surprising, disturbing, when really I was getting a wheelchair out of the church and pulling it out and holding the door open with my body at the same time. So it's the front of a church and a door to go in. So it's extremely heavy, but the chair was aluminum, a very light wheelchair. And I just got it outside and was trying to get it over to the man who needed it. He was very feeble, and she did not want me to do that.
So you deny that
I couldn't have done that because I was holding this church door open and taking the wheelchair out. And when I grabbed the front of the wheelchair, I don't know where she was. I don't remember how close she was to the wheelchair, but it's silly.
Yeah. Well, Jane, let's talk about when you get down to this paragraph, which is, the way this is written. This is a formal rebuke, whereas, therefore, that kind of thing, and it says here is your penalty part right here. Therefore, I hereby direct that Mrs. Jane Bernardel is forbidden to be on any property of any parish or any school, chancery office, or diocesan ministry within the territory of the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph at this time. Well, what has been the real impact? What does this mean to you, Jane?
Well, my canon lawyer actually in May I just had to call Father Ken Riley, and get permission for me to go to my daughter's baptism in another church in Missouri.
Yeah.
And, they took it extremely seriously and wrote a letter telling me I could, and how I could only go to the baptism and come back out.
But you're not even able to attend Mass in the diocese where you regularly attended Mass.
No, and I could not go to that Mass that day. The baptism was thankfully afterwards. It really didn't tie in with the Mass, of course. So,
Jane, what do you think is going on here? What is really at the heart of all this? Because you just told us that there was no conviction here. I mean, your case was legally dismissed. So now, the bishop took it upon himself, to really come down on you hard. And I want to point this out too, Jane, that he sent you this letter in February. It's not like you got the letter and decided, I'm going to call LifeSiteNews and, do something about this. No, here we are months, almost a year later before you're finally talking about this. So what do you think is really going on, Jane?
The question from my canon lawyer, who she didn't know me from Adam, and so she had to know if she wanted to do this, help me with this case. And so she did talk to me for hours and hours, and she has had to go against a lot of bishops in the United States, or a few bishops in the United States. And she does know they're heavy-handed, but usually she can pinpoint why they're picking on so-and-so. But when I told her, I really just think it's just because I didn't mask, that at first she didn't believe me, but I really don't know what else it would be.
Well, that represents so many things to people. It was like masking became sort of a religion unto itself during that time. And, heck, there's still people running around with masks. I see them at Mass on regular basis, with, contrary to all the evidence that masks only did anything but harm people. But, now's a good time for you to talk about that, Jane. Why did you make the decision that you weren't going to mask?
Well, I think at the time, it was just an instinct that just felt very wrong to mask in church. And it wasn't like I went in against all these people. There was no one there. It was dark. My family was the only one there, except the person who opened the door. And, we, at that time, it was an hour before the prayer service was going to begin. And so it wasn't like I'd ever thought, oh, will I, I'd avoided churches that did make you mask, but I didn't think I would be put in that situation. But I guess I found out just how deep it was that I would not mask in front of Jesus. So that it was interesting because that came up in the court hearing, and it actually went all the way to a judge, and the hearing lasted over 2 hours. And
I'm so sorry, Jane.
I forget what my train of thought, but the prosecuting attorney asked me, I'm masked today. You're in the courtroom today with a mask on, and you've been here for over, an hour. Why couldn't you mask then? And of course I said, well, that's because the presence of Jesus Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity isn't here. And she's like backpedaling because, oh yeah, she forgot that she was a Catholic too. So it did come up even in the,
You know what, Jane, I think that's what it is. I think we have bishops in this country who don't like Catholics, to be honest with you. I mean, that's the bottom line, because we know that most Catholics in the United States of America do not believe in the real presence in the Eucharist.
Yeah.
So there you go. Not long after I was doing a little tour of the Midwest back when all this was happening. Well, in the summer, so just, a couple of months after I met with your family, I covered this heretical priest conference in Minneapolis, where you had Catholic priests and bishops attending this conference, where they were openly supporting homosexual marriage.
You were in the presence of that?
I took pictures. I've got the proof. I mean, yeah, I had a confrontation with one of the priests there at the time. But they think you're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have this beautiful picture of our church. It is universal, and each bishop is in charge of a jurisdiction. And by the time you're done, the whole earth is covered with what is to be people who are to protect their flock.
Yeah.
So it's weird that they would have the time to pick on me. I don't work. I don't have a large following. I don't even have Facebook.
Well, Jane, you know what? You're my sister. That's who you are, and I guarantee you, everybody watching this right now is going to be lifting you up in prayer. So please know that, Jane. I know we've had so many conversations.
I don't mean to be so.
No, Jane, look. I can't believe how.
Our fountain, no matter what happens to us, no matter how much we're slandered, I know I have a Christian foundation that will get me through it. And
yep.
I really am sad that I am still so upset about it. But
well, Jane, you have every right. This is an injustice. I think I've never heard of this before. It's not like you were a real threat to anybody. You weren't any kind of threat to anyone in that parish. And you're the one who needs to be loved. You're the one who needs spiritual comfort right now. So tell us, Jane, you went into Kansas City, Missouri because there was a Latin Mass. Do you have a Latin Mass where you can now attend in Kansas?
There is a Latin Mass in Kansas in a very extremely small church that I guess they bought the property, and it was a Protestant church. And like my family really, to get there and get a pew and not go to the basement for the visual, there's always overflow every week, and so we have to get there. We leave early for it and have to get there. Around 45 minutes. If you don't get there 45 minutes before church starts, we would not have a pew.
Well, you know what?
We have a son with a wheelchair, so there's no place for the wheelchair, except the last two pews.
Oh. Well, before it's all said and done, we might all have to move to St. Mary's, Kansas. Who knows? And
it's looking, it has given me pause to think about what our church is. Jesus's church is divine and pure and without blemish and stain. So that makes me think something is wrong. And
you know what? 2 weeks ago, Bishop Schneider was sitting right here where I'm sitting right now, and he was talking about, Catholics may have to be prepared to join the underground church. I mean, that's what this is coming to, Jane. So Jane, where do you go from here? What's next? I mean, is this you talked about your canon lawyer, and is there any hope that an honest listening to your appeal will be heard?
I don't think so. That's why I'm talking to you, because I called you after the letter the response that the bishop sent to my canon lawyer in September, after she had taken a great amount of time visiting with me to understand the whole situation, and then writing a letter. So this second letter came back, and in her letter she had talked about how I don't need shunned, that I have a rather a large family, and I should be I should be taken care of by the bishop. And he said that it was his it's his pastoral duty to punish me. And that he wasn't shunning me, but that he didn't use act of charity, but it was his pastoral duty to punish me.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's going to be his pastoral duty now to be responding to all the phone calls that he's going to be getting, and all the letters that are going to be coming into the office of the Diocese of Kansas City, Missouri. So, Bishop Johnson, we're appealing you to make this right, Your Excellency. Jane, thank you. Thank you for coming forward. I know this hasn't been easy for you. We've had many phone conversations, and you said no. I don't want to talk about this yet, because you were praying, you were hoping that it could be made right. But you're right. It just doesn't seem like there's any real hope that he's going to do the right thing here.
Yeah.
All right, Jane. Well, please know you're going to have tens of thousands of Catholics praying for you now all over the world.
Thank you very much, Jim.
So let's go back to the other women that really are leaders in this movement. Probably the best known one is Abby Johnson. She, as I said earlier, was on the other side big time, and then has come to a defense of life in a way that is really strong, is really stark. You could almost say fierce. She has a book out called Fierce Mercy that you should take a look at. But she's a defender of the lives of innocent children in beautiful, beautiful ways. I just had her on my show. Take a look, just a few clips from that.
Yeah, we've helped 630 abortion workers leave their jobs. And, yes, we help them get new jobs. Yes, all of that is true. But really the victory for us is helping them come into relationship or get back into relationship with Christ. That's really the victory. And because it's not just about a job, it's so much more than that. And that's what we do. We don't really consider it a victory. We don't really count that number unless that's the end goal. That's the final result. And it's really amazing. And I have to tell you, for those that have some sort of childhood faith foundation, the bulk of them are fallen away Catholics. And so getting them back into the sacraments, it's like witnessing a miracle, and it completely changes their life. And it's such a beautiful thing. And really, I have to tell you the story. We had a woman who, I won't use her name, but she was a fallen away Catholic. She had worked in the industry. And we have these healing retreats for our former workers, and they have different phases. So our phase 1 retreats are the first time they've ever come on a healing retreat with us. And our retreats are run by therapists. So they're typically run by me and another therapist. And I'm Catholic, and the other therapist is a Protestant. And this woman came, and she had worked at a Planned Parenthood abortion facility. And she had been inside of a psychiatric hospital since working in a Planned Parenthood, had suffered greatly with her mental health, which is not surprising after working in an abortion facility and doing some of the things that she had done. And she had not been to confession in years. And so we had this healing retreat, and she said to me, Abby, do you think there's any way, after the first day, she said, do you think there's any way that you could get me to confession? And she said, I really want to go. And I said, oh, I bet I could find a priest that would hear your confession. So I called a friend of mine who lives down the road in our community. And I said, Father Brian, I said, is there any way, this is a Saturday, and I said, is there any way that you could hear one of our clients' confessions? And he said, absolutely. He said, when could you be up at the church? So we met him up there, and I didn't actually go. I stayed back with the other women. I was helping them. And the Protestant therapist, Amanda, actually took this woman up to the Catholic Church and met. Now, this woman she was an older lady, and she was just very sort of withdrawn, even just her posture was sort of inward, and even her coloring, it's sort of hard to describe, but her coloring was almost sort of ashen, just sort of like, just not a lot of color there, not a lot of pink in her face, just a woman, she just looked very troubled. And so my friend Amanda takes her, and she sits down with Father Brian, and they have a really long, great confession. She comes out, she comes back to the house, and she looked like a different woman. I mean, physically, she looked different. Her shoulders were opened up. She wasn't, drawn in anymore. Her chest was open, her shoulders were opened up, and her face was a different color. Her face was like pink. It wasn't this gray, like ashen color anymore. It was pink. She had pink in her face and her cheeks. Her eyes were brighter. And so my Protestant friend, Amanda, she said, Abby, I've never seen anything like this before. She said she went into the chapel, and she came out, and she physically looked different. It was like a different woman that walked in and came out. And I said, well, yeah, I said, that's the power of confession, right? And our therapist, Amanda, or this Protestant therapist, she's a pastor's wife. And she said, she said, Abby, there's something about that confession. I said, yeah, there is something about that confession. And so being able to help these former workers who are fallen away Catholics getting back into the sacraments, getting reconnected with the Eucharist, getting reconnected with these holy sacraments is such an amazing miracle. And we're able to do that. We've been able to do it hundreds of times. It's just really, it's a beautiful thing.
And it's true. The truth will never change, but also the devil's promises to go for that, sin that he wants you to do, whether it be abortion or anything else, is an empty promise. And here to tell us that is a small clip from the Bishop Strickland show, which we're so privileged to have every week at LifeSite News. Check out this clip. Be sure to check out the Bishop Strickland show on LifeSite News every week.
What is the church here for if not to make saints and get people to heaven? But what we've lost touch with, even beyond that, is sin masquerades. I love the way when I celebrate confirmation.
Yes.
One of the questions of the renewal of baptismal promises, do you reject Satan in his empty promises? Mm-hmm. That is what we're forgetting. Sin brings an empty promise of pleasure, of fulfillment, of feeling, this closeness, whatever the sin is. When we sin, it's an empty promise, even for this life. And if we embrace that sin, an empty promise may last for a bit, but it doesn't allow us to flourish. It doesn't bring us fulfillment. It brings us ultimately destruction, even in this life.
And another great woman in the pro-life movement is Patricia Sandoval. She's perhaps less known than Abby, but her story is no less incredible. In fact, she had 3 abortions and has also, like Abby, not only become pro-life, but a great champion for life and a great champion of faith as well. Abby, as you know, became a Catholic, and Patricia Sandoval has embraced the faith like nobody else. Take a look at a few clips from that interview with Patricia Sandoval, and you can see, of course, the whole episode on the John-Henry Westen Show.
Unfortunately, I never received any type of understanding of my faith when I was a child at home. I didn't know what virtue was. I didn't know what the virtue of chastity was as a child. I didn't have that example. My parents never married through the church. So Planned Parenthood came to my school when I was in the 6th grade. And I say that I was a victim for the first time of the abortion industry when I was 12 years old. I believe that they stole and they robbed my innocence, because back in 1992, when there was no technology, no, internet, none of that, I had a pure mindset, and they came in and they gave us this false education about safe sex, which does not exist. And I believe it was all a trap. Planned Parenthood, they need quotas. They need a certain amount of abortions per month because it's a blood money market. And I fell into that trap. They told us it wasn't really a baby when a woman is pregnant until 5 months gestation. And they told us it was our body, our choice if we ever found ourselves, the young girls in an unwanted pregnancy. And that's exactly what happened to me on 3 occasions. I thought I was practicing safe sex, and it failed all 3 times with birth control. And I thought abortion was my liberation, was my way out. I thought abortion would save me from having all my goals and dreams just, dying. I was one of those young girls that believed that a baby destroyed your dreams, basically. And, when I was 12 years old, after that class, I declared myself pro-abortion. And they lied to me at the abortion clinic on 3 occasions before my 3 abortions, and never told me about post-abortion syndrome. They told me that the only symptoms I would have would be cramping, and that's it. And I can, go to work the next day. But I suffered mental, emotional damage. I suffered even physical damage from those 3 abortions. Even my boyfriend at the time was suffering post-abortion syndrome as well. And I was pretty much suicidal. And I applied to work for Planned Parenthood after that, still being very pro-abortion, pro-choice. I actually applied as a reception, but since I knew how to speak fluent Spanish and English, they were so excited that I was post-abortive fluent. They actually gave me the job as a back office nurse with no credentials, illegal nurse. And that's where I saw the reality of abortion. That's where I faced my raw reality that I was lied to. They don't care about women. They don't care about the youth. And I had to assist the abortionist and be the abortionist's eyes, because during those procedures, the abortionist cannot see what he is doing inside of the womb of that young girl or that woman. And I had to be the abortionist's eyes and look for the body parts of the babies. And it was very horrific. It was heartbreaking, especially seeing the expression on those babies' faces, their mouth wide open, because those babies were screaming, those babies were crying, but they didn't have a voice. And then I obviously didn't know God, so got heavily involved with methamphetamine, drugs, homelessness, lost everything in my soul. I mean, I was lost. I was a dead woman walking. And it was thanks to my mother's prayers that somebody rescued me off the street. It was thanks to my mother being on her knees for 3 years that I'm alive today. Thanks God to my mom. I knew that God forgave me, but I think a lot of women cannot forgive themselves, especially myself, because I saw where the unborn end up. They end up in a trash can, in a dumpster. I touched it with my hands. I smelt it. I saw it. I lived it. And I knew that my children ended up in a trash can. And it was during a retreat that I had a grace from God. I closed my eyes and I was praying, and I actually saw my 3 aborted children, a little girl, a little boy, and a little girl. And they yelled out, "Mother, we're in God's glory, we're praying for you." And I do believe, John-Henry, with my whole heart, that those aborted children, they pray for their parents to become saints. They pray for their parents' conversion. And I believe that that's what my children do still. And that was the hope that I had during that retreat, that my children, maybe they're gone here on earth, but they are alive in heaven. And so I decided to defend life with all my heart, to repair. It's very important we do reparation, to repair the damage that I've done, and to give my children honor.
And take a look at this. Jim Hale was out in D.C. where they're protesting now. What's happening is the Biden administration is going crazy. It's going after pro-lifers, and they're doing absolutely nothing about all of the vandalisms at these pro-life crisis pregnancy centers. And so pro-lifers were out in force to demonstrate against that, to call out the Biden administration. But watch this video. But at the end, there's 2 young ladies who present the case to come out and to work for life. But the one of them says to do it despite the sacrifices it causes. Check this out.
Hello, friends. Jim Hale in front of the Department of Justice here in D.C., where we have a wintry mix that has descended on us. It's cold, but you know what? That is not going to stop the pro-life activists who've gathered out here today in front of the Justice Department to tell Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Christopher Wray that they are not going to be silenced.
Somehow the Department of Justice can't seem to find, and the FBI under the Biden administration can't seem to find one individual or any of the individuals responsible for the vandalism and the attacks on centers like Stanton Healthcare. It is a blatant and obvious double standard that must come to an end.
I am standing in front of the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world, and not one indictment. Justice is supposed to be blind. However, to be honest, it's Merrick Garland who's blind. It's Kristen Clarke who's blind. Blind to the evil of abortion. Blind to the injustice of abortion. And apparently blind to the numerous attacks on churches and pregnancy help centers.
Freedom of speech and assembly is one the Constitution famously protects. But good old Joe has decided to believe those protections work only for pro-abortion radicals who burn down pregnancy centers and harass and threaten pro-lifers.
In an unbelievable act of arrogance and blatant disregard for equal justice, the Biden administration nominated outspoken pro-abortion activist Kristen Clarke as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Clarke ordered the armed raid on pro-life activist Mark Houck, who was arrested in front of his children at his home. and has failed to arrest anyone associated with acts of violence against pro-life organizations and churches. Protesters yesterday called for Clarke to be fired, despite a token gesture announced by the DOJ recently offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the Buffalo Pregnancy Center arsonist.
You only did that after you were pressured by us. You only did that after you were embarrassed by your lack of commitment to justice. And can I say this? You have a $60 billion budget. $25,000 isn't enough. To show us you are serious, fire Kristen Clarke and set up a task force to look at violence directed toward the pro-life community. I'm seeing the Biden administration, I'm seeing the government who are saying if you speak freely and it's not what we believe, then we are going to imprison you. If you speak freely about what you believe and it's not what we believe, then you are no longer good for society and you're going to become a prisoner for us.
The truth will prevail. Like, we need to keep on fighting despite the persecution, the lashback, and all of the hurt and pain that comes with this, because despite like some of our great victories, there have also been great cultural setbacks of people attacking us. And I just want to tell those people that keep on fighting for the truth, even until the death, and the truth will prevail.
We are in better position than we were weeks ago to pass pro-life legislation all across the country, and there's so many wins ahead. And now is the time to join. If you're not in the pro-life movement, if you're not active, if you're not doing things genuinely in your daily, weekly, monthly life, get involved now, because we have momentum, we are going forward, and you want to be a part of it.
Father, we commit our movement to you as we face this new changing dynamic across the landscape of our nation, a post-Roe America. It's fraught with challenges and victories and defeats and struggles. But through it all, Father, for 49 years, we labored to overturn Roe, and we saw that on June 24th. Now we labor for equal justice and making abortion unthinkable. Guide and lead us in your holy name, the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, we pray. Amen.
And finally, we have a real hero at LifeSite News every day in Mother Miriam. Mother Miriam Live airs every day at LifeSite News. I hope you check that show out if you haven't already. If you don't know about it, Mother Miriam Live is very much like Mother Angelica Live, and that's the inspiration for that name anyway. And so Mother Miriam Live is out every day, and she gives us the truth in a way that only she can. It's beautiful, it's forceful, and it's done with someone who is a convert to the faith from Judaism. It's just so wonderful. We're so pleased to give you just a little snippet of it, but encourage you to check out the whole show, Mother Miriam Live. Here she is with her Mother Miriam Minute.
I know many women, dear ones, who have had an abortion, and they live with the guilt of that their entire lives. They may not feel guilty when they have the abortion. They might be an atheist at that point. They might be a Catholic in name only, whatever it is. But later, they may be converts to the faith, or their conscience may begin to bother them once they learn that there is no abortion that does not fit in the category of murder. A child is a child at the moment of conception. It's not a clump of tissue. It doesn't become a child. It is a child. And if we didn't use the word abortion, if we use the word murder or dismemberment of babies, come to this Planned Parenthood clinic and have the baby in your womb ripped apart. We'll even do it for free. I think that would change the scene a little bit, but that would be honest. For Catholics, let me see. It doesn't matter what your conscience tells you. People say, well, I shouldn't go against my conscience. This is true, but your conscience needs to be informed with truth. And if it's truth, it's Catholic, no matter where it is, no matter who speaks it. If it's truth, it's Catholic. It's from God.
And there is no greater fighter for life, faith, family, and freedom than the greatest woman who ever lived, Our Lady herself. And so with her intercession for us and for all of our ladies who fight for life, faith, family, and freedom, this is John-Henry Westen for LifeSite News in Focus, and may God bless you. Hi everyone, this is John-Henry Westen. We hope you enjoyed this video, and to see more like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSite News. So check out our links in the description to read more, sign up for our newsletter, and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all of the latest life, family, and culture news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.